Hello, Adams. For lesson 7 today, we are going to start learning about how the church played a really important role in almost everyone's lives during the Middle Ages. So here is your vocabulary for today's chapter. Summon is a verb, and that means to call or send for someone. Anchored is an adjective, and it means strongly connected. Fast is a verb, and it means to eat little or no food. We're not talking about running fast. We're talking about fasting, which means to not eat very much. A rose window is a noun, and it is a circular stained glass window in a church that contains a pattern near the center. A spire is a noun, and it's a tall cone-shaped structure at the top of a building. Devote is a verb, to give time or attention to something. Exquisite is an adjective, and it means extremely beautiful. Destined is an adjective, and it means certain to become something or do something. Humble is an adjective, not thinking you are better than others. And sacred is an adjective, which means holy and deserving special respect. So chapter 5 is titled The Power of the Church, and the big question is going to be, what practices in the Middle Ages show the influence and power of the church? It is 6 a.m. The church bells are ringing to welcome the day and to summon you to church. The early morning sunlight illuminates the stained glass windows. Sometimes at daybreak you attend a church service before starting work. You pray often, and your life is anchored to the church. Stained glass windows in La Sainte-Chapelle in Paris, France, built in the 1200s. It may be impossible for us to understand just how important the Christian church was to most Europeans in the Middle Ages. Not only did the local lords have great influence over people's lives, but the church did too. The power of the church had grown gradually over a long period of time. Christianity is based on the teachings of a man named Jesus who lived hundreds of years before the Middle Ages began. Jesus' followers were known as Christians. In the first 300 years after Jesus' life, Christianity grew slowly. In fact, in the early years of the ancient Roman civilization, Romans were not permitted to practice the Christian faith. Later, Christianity was tolerated as one religion among several. Eventually, it became the official religion of the Roman Empire. Christianity spread throughout the empire. As it spread, the power and influence of the church in Rome grew. The Pope was the leader of the Western Church. And this image says, under the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great, Christianity was accepted as one of several religions in the Roman Empire. As time went on during the Middle Ages, conflicts developed between the Eastern followers of the church who spoke Greek and the Western followers who spoke Latin. Finally, in 1054 CE, the two sides split over differing beliefs. The Eastern Church was called Orthodox. Members of the Orthodox Church thought their beliefs were orthodox or correct. The Western Church, based in Rome, was called Catholic. Members of the Catholic Church thought their beliefs were Catholic or universal. This is showing how the Christian church split apart. The two Christian churches that emerged during the Middle Ages still exist today. In Western Europe, almost every village and town had a church. Most people attended church on Sunday. In addition, certain days were considered holy days to mark important events in the life of Jesus and his followers. People did not work on these days, but instead they went to church. Some holy days were feast days, and other holy days were days of fasting. Christmas, an important Christian holiday, was a time of feasting or celebration. The 40 days before Easter, another Christian holiday, were a time of fasting called Lent. Architects and craftsmen in the Middle Ages built beautiful churches to express their love for God. New engineering skills enabled stonemasons to create a style of architecture that later became known as Gothic. They built tall towers, arches, rose windows, and spires. Sometimes it took hundreds of years to complete a great medieval cathedral. And this is an image of the Chartres Cathedral, sorry. Holy shrines dedicated to people who played an important role in the history of Christianity were scattered across Western Europe. These shrines were usually places where religious figures had been killed or buried, or where miracles were believed to have happened. Most Christians hoped to go on at least one journey or pilgrimage to visit one of those shrines in their lifetime. For many, going on a pilgrimage meant walking or riding long distances and eating and sleeping in roadside taverns or religious houses. Many men and women made the journey to fulfill a vow to God to seek a cure for a disease or just to travel abroad. And these are some medieval pilgrims. Monks were men who chose to live apart from society and to devote their lives to the church. They spent their lives in monasteries, working on the land, studying, and praying. Monks were often the most educated people in Europe, especially in the early part of the Middle Ages. A monastery was a building or collection of buildings that housed monks. Monasteries were usually contained within high walls that provided a certain amount of protection. And this is a picture of the these names, guys. SANY Abbey in Provence, France, was founded in 1148 CE. Probably said that wrong, but that's okay. Women also joined the church. Women who devoted their lives to the church were called nuns. Nuns lived in convents or nunneries. Nuns received many of the same benefits as monks. They were educated and were taught crafts and other skills. As the church grew in power and influence, it became very wealthy. The church raised taxes and it owned land. People who held powerful positions within the church often came from wealthy noble families. They gave large amounts of money to the church. The church also influenced political decisions and supported or opposed kings. This is a painting from the 1400s showing nuns kneeling in prayer. Not only powerful people gave money to the church, all Christians were required to pay 1/10 of their earnings to the church. This payment was known as a tithe. However, there was a troubling side to this deeply religious period in history. Some people expressed ideas with which the Pope and other church leaders disagreed. Church leaders called these contradictory opinions hearsay, and the people who held them were called heretics. Heretics were treated cruelly. This is the interior of the Duomo or Cathedral of Pisa, Italy, and it was begun in the 1000s. Precious books. During the Middle Ages, monks and nuns studied the writings of ancient Greeks and Romans. Their libraries contained books about religion, science, poetry, mathematics, and history. Monks and nuns also copied ancient writings by hand. There were no machines or printers that made books. By copying these texts, monks and nuns helped to preserve or save ancient knowledge that would otherwise have been lost. And this is showing illuminated manuscripts were works of art. In the late Middle Ages, the higher social classes, who could read and even write, owned their own prayer books, such as the Books of Hours. These prayer books were read at different times of the day. In addition to prayers, the books included biblical texts, calendars, hymns, and painted pictures. Many of the books produced by monks and nuns contained exquisite art and design features. After the Middle Ages, as a result of Johannes Gutenberg's invention of the printing press around 1450 CE, more affordable books were produced. These printed books began to replace the beautiful handmade books and made the original manuscripts even more rare. And this is a page from Book of Hours, created in the early 1400s for John, Duke of Berry. If you were a monk, young boys like you are often given to a monastery. Even a serf can become a monk. Therefore, if you are not destined to become a craftsman or a merchant, then becoming a monk is a good option. Life within a monastery certainly is hard. However, you are assured of a place to sleep, clothing, food, and medical care, and an education. Your training will take many years. When you start your training, you are called a novice. Here's a novice. Another word for beginner. You begin by learning to read and write. You study texts from the Bible, pray, and learn to farm or to acquire a certain skill. If at the end of your training you are certain you want to join the church, you take part in a special ceremony. This is a novice working in the garden. In this ceremony, you vow or promise to dedicate your life to God. You also vow not to marry and to live a humble and obedient life. Then the top of your head is shaved, identifying you as a monk. And this is a novice taking vows. As a monk, you spend a large part of your day in worship and prayer. However, you also spend time working on the land or in the monastery itself. You might wash clothes, cook, or tend to the vegetable garden. You might learn to make honey, wine, or beer, or you might learn how to make shoes or furniture. If you have a beautiful singing voice, you might participate in the performance of Georgian chants. Georgian chants are a form of a sacred vocal music or musical speech based on hymns or passages from the Bible. Monks perform these chants on certain holy days. And this is a picture of monks chanting the hymns. As a gifted artist, you might work in the scriptorium, copying the work of classical writers or producing new books. For many like you, the life of a monk provides a degree of security and protection from some of the challenges of medieval life. And this is a monk working in the scriptorium. This is a monk's daily prayer schedule. And your questions. Please make sure to go back into the text and find the answers. Number 1. What do you think it means when the text says your life is anchored to the church? 2. Which quote from the text supports this answer to number 1? 3. What were the two parts called when the Christian church split? 4. What is not a true statement about Christians in the Middle Ages celebrating holy days? 5. Which description matches the architecture of the churches and cathedrals? 6. What makes a window a rose window? 7. What is a pilgrimage? 8. Who were monks? 9. What were nuns? 10. The church in the Middle Ages had a difficult time getting money, true or false? 11. How did the church help save knowledge from the ancient Greeks and Romans? 12. Many of the books produced by monks and nuns contained exquisite art and design features. What does that word exquisite mean? 13. Which was not an advantage of living in a monastery? And 14. Which was not a promise that monks made when they joined the church? I will see you all for lesson 8. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.